Hello guys. Today what we're going to be doing is looking at thesis statements. You have all written thesis statements in the past. You've used them when you were writing STAR tests, when you were doing the TSIs or the SATs. So all of you have had some kind of familiarity with a thesis statement before, though some of you probably haven't had it explained to you very well. Others of you probably have blanked on what exactly a thesis is since then. It happens to everyone. That's completely fine. For both of those types of people, you'll have a nice little refresher lesson today where we're going to explain it like you're 5. I think is usually the best way to do a lot of these things. So yes, today we'll look at thesis statements. So what is a thesis statement, you may be asking yourself? A thesis statement is your paper's central idea. It is the idea that your entire paper will be organized around. And it's not just important because it tells the reader what your paper's about. It's more important because it tells you what your paper's about when you're writing it. It gives you an organization that you can structure your paper around. The thesis is the main central point, and then everything else that you do in your paper is going to be organized around that idea. And so, if you don't have that central point figured out, then it's going to disrupt and affect how well you're able to do the rest of it. You can imagine if you took all of the meaning and all of the sentences and paragraphs in your paper and laid them out into how they all fit together. Your paper would look something like this, where your thesis was at the center of a web that contained all of the different parts of your paper on the outskirts of it. Your thesis is the center. The rest of your paper is spreading further and further out. That determines what your body paragraphs are about, what your supporting points are, the evidence that you're going to look up and use. So if you don't have that central part figured out, then it's going to make the rest of that suffer quite a lot. You can also kind of imagine a thesis as the foundation of a house. If you build a house, but you don't put a foundation in, you build the walls, you build the roof, you build the plumbing and the electricity in the walls and stuff like that. You can do a really good job on all of that other stuff. But if you haven't put a foundation in, then you're not going to make a very good house, and it will collapse in on itself. This is something that I really hope to get through to you guys, is that you have to have a good thesis before you get started writing. Otherwise, you can put a huge amount of effort into your paper and have it still be kind of a confusing mess. If you have a good thesis statement, that shouldn't happen. Alright, so there's 2 parts to a thesis statement. The first part is going to be the thing that you're arguing, the point that you're making, and the second part is going to be why that's true, or your reasoning. So here is an example broken down into those 2 parts. People who can afford to should switch to electric cars. This is what I'm arguing for. This is the point that I'm going to make with this thesis. And then because they are cheaper to drive and better for the environment. So what I'm arguing here, people should switch to electric cars if they can, and then why that's true. They're cheaper to drive and better for the environment. Those are the 2 main things you're looking for. You're not looking to add any evidence in at this point. You're not looking to go into any detail at this point. You just want a basic explanation of what you're going to be talking about in your paper, what your point is, and what your reasoning is, in 1 sentence. Okay, so some more examples. San Antonio should fund more bus routes because doing so would improve our dangerous air quality and would make traveling to work easier for those without cars. Excuse me. We're just going to roll with that. Okay. Yeah, so what I'm arguing here, that San Antonio should fund more bus routes. And my reasoning for that is because of the dangerous air quality and to make traveling to work easier. School funding should not be based on standardized test scores because that practice hurts schools that need the most help. My argument that I'm making: school funding should not be based on standardized test scores. My reasoning: it hurts the schools that need the most help. And then last of all here, low staffing. This one I've gone in the reverse order. I've given my reasoning first, and then I've given my point afterwards. Low staffing, heavy overtime, harassment, and difficult patients are all sources of nursing burnout. All right, so let's go ahead and practice this together. If we were meeting in person, of course, I would have different people actually practice this. So what we would do here is, first of all, I'd have students come up with a hot take. A hot take is a concept that goes against what most of the people that you live around believe. So this one, we're trying to keep it fun, so no politics or religion or anything like that. But everyone has some kind of hot take that they believe in or that they think about, and this gives people an opportunity to shine with those. You don't have to believe in the hot take that you pick, but you will need to defend it in the second part. So here are some examples. In-N-Out is better than Whataburger. Where I live, in San Antonio at least, that would be a pretty hot take because most people are huge Whataburger fans. The Rockets are a better organization than the Spurs. This, again, would be a pretty hot take here in San Antonio. In Houston, it probably wouldn't be. And then DC movies are better than Marvels. Most people would say that Marvels are better. So if you say DC movies are better, then you're going against the grain of what most people believe. Yeah, so we joke around about each one of these. Everyone would take about a minute to write down their own hot take. We share a few of them at this point, and laugh at some of them. And then we move on to part two. Yeah, so everyone shared their hot takes at this point. Now we're moving on to part two here. Part two, come up with reasoning to support your hot take. So this is where you'll come up with the because part of your thesis statement that you're making up. And you will give some reasoning as to why your hot take is correct. You might have to do a tiny bit of research. I actually had to do some for some of these. But yeah, I'm only going to give you a couple minutes, so do your best. Here are some examples. In-N-Out is better than Whataburger because In-N-Out has fast service, fresh ingredients, and animal style. And even the best Whataburger fan will agree that In-N-Out definitely has us on the fast service part. The Rockets are a better organization than the Spurs because they have a bigger fan base, draw more exciting talent. Yeah, so yeah, the Rockets live in a bigger market. They have better toys than the Spurs do generally, so that's an advantage that they've got, right? DC movies are better than Marvels because they have the Dark Knight trilogy and they take more artistic risks. And now I think people are starting to come around on DC more than Marvel a lot of times. But yeah, these are some good things that they definitely did over the Marvel people. So now we would have everybody take another couple minutes, write down some answers as to why. I'll pick out a few people that look like they're ready to talk. They'll give their answers. We'll laugh about the ones that are funny. And then I would point out, okay, this is how a thesis statement works. You've come up with what you're arguing for in your paper. You've come up with your reasoning. If you are a real fan of this hot take, you could probably write a paper about this right now. But the important part is to have that central idea explaining to you all of the things that you need to put into your paper. Okay, so there's 3 things that a thesis needs in order to be good. A thesis statement needs to be challenging, grounded, and focused. Without those, you're going to have a hard time writing your paper because you don't have a good thesis statement. So first of all, challenging. A thesis statement, your thesis argument needs to argue something that is arguable, something that you can actually argue about in good faith. Thesis can't be an established fact, purely opinion, or a question. So here are some examples of bad theses about the healthcare system. 1 in 5 healthcare workers quit their job during the pandemic. This would be a bad thesis because this is an established fact. You can Google how many healthcare workers quit their job during the pandemic, and it will tell you this number every single time. Because it's a fact, it would be very hard to actually write a paper with this as my Google is actually Googling that as I say this. Yeah, it would be very hard for you to write a paper about this because it's not really arguable. There's nothing to go into with it. I want to be a nurse when I graduate. This would be a bad thesis statement for most of the papers we write because it's just an opinion. It's only specific to you, right? If you're writing a paper about like what you want to be when you grow up, that could work for this, but most of the time this wouldn't be a good thesis statement because it's very specific to you. Why is nursing burnout so bad? This one's a bad thesis statement because it is a question. You can't ask a question and have that be your thesis statement because you're supposed to be answering the question in your paper. This would be what we call a research question, and whatever the answer to it is would be your thesis statement. So here's a possible answer. Low staffing, heavy overtime, harassment, and difficult patients are all sources of nursing burnout. Alright, next part here, a thesis needs to be grounded. Your thesis needs to be specific enough to actually talk about. If you're just being very vague and not going into a lot of detail with your thesis, then it won't be strong enough to actually defend. So, a bad thesis that isn't grounded. Cities should have more public transportation because it is healthier and more convenient. So this is a bad thesis because, like I said, it's not grounded. Some cities need more public transportation. Other cities don't. Other cities have lots of public transportation. Some types of public transportation probably aren't very healthy or convenient. So it's better if you can focus in and be specific and say a specific place, a specific people, a specific audience, that kind of thing. San Antonio should fund more bus routes because doing so would improve our dangerous air quality and would make traveling to work easier for those without cars. So much more specific, much more grounded, much more easy to find research for because you can just go out and find specific stuff about the transportation in San Antonio. Last of all, focused. Your thesis should be narrow enough to support in a few pages. And this is a mistake that a lot of freshmen make. They think if I make my my thesis broad enough, then I will be able to use any research that I find to write in order to support it. I don't have to narrow myself as much. I can write about anything I want. But the problem with that is that if you're not narrowing it enough, if you're not focusing enough, then the topic won't tell you exactly what to write for that paper. Let's see. Yeah, if you pick a topic that's too broad and has way too much to write about, you won't be able to fit all of that into a 5 or 7 page paper. Yeah, you want something that's narrow enough that can actually fit into this. So, here's a bad example. World War II changed the world in many ways. This is a bad thesis statement because World War II probably changed everything about the world. It changed the people in the world, it changed the economy, it changed the shape of nations, changed government types, changed the animals that are alive on the planet, and the amount of pollution in the atmosphere. It changed almost everything. So there are libraries that are devoted to talking about all of the ways that World War II changed the world. And they are incomplete too. You're not going to be able to write a paper about this. So here's a better thesis that's more focused. because of its because of its high melting point. Oops. Because of its high calorie count, high melting point, and disgusting taste, Hershey's D ration saved thousands of American soldiers from starvation during the most desperate moments of World War II. So this is a real candy bar that existed, that Hershey made, that tasted like potatoes and just was as many calories as you could cram into one chocolate bar, and it saved a lot of people that were on Iwo Jima and islands in the Pacific specifically. But it tasted terrible, so that they wouldn't just eat it for fun. Okay. And this is a more specific one, and you could write about this in a few pages and find specific articles about this, and maybe even try one of these yourself. Alright, so last thing, this would be a practice where we would go around the room. I would call on people who looked like they were having a fun time talking, and I would ask them to explain what was wrong with each of these thesis statements. The first one here, poverty is a big problem that needs to be solved. This one is not grounded well enough, so it needs to have more specifics. Poverty among veterans is a problem that needs to be solved by doing whatever, right? Something like that. Why is college tuition so expensive? This one's a question. So the answer to this question needs to be the thesis. 20,292 people were killed due to drunk driving last year in Texas. This is a established fact, of course. Dr. Pepper tastes better than Mr. Pibb. This one's an opinion, and so it's not a good thesis. Space is the future of mankind because of technology and innovation. This one is not focused enough. So for this case, I'd tell them maybe write about the SpaceX rockets, or write about one of the Mars missions, or something like that instead. Alright, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. I look forward to hearing from you guys soon.